If you're selling insurance, you're really selling security. You're selling peace of mind. You know, there's a little bit of like tax avoidance and all that stuff, and you need to educate them about all that stuff. I think really separates salesers from close people. Closers tend to be curious people. Look, sales is a hard job in a lot of ways. And if you're not interested in people and how they make decisions, it's going to be a hard job.
And to me, oftentimes, there's a lack of awareness in what they're actually even doing.
It's not awareness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We have a tremendous episode for you today, a conversation with Bob King. He's the author of The Joy of Closing. Bob is a lifelong salesman and sales coach, as well as being the VP of sales for multiple organizations in solar and insurance, as well as the cosmetics industries. And Bob shares his insights into how we can build an emotional journey for our customers, whether we're selling B2C or B2B, to drive more sales through trust, through openness, through connection, through kind of being a closer, not a poser, as he puts it. And one idea that really caught me, because I do a lot of sales coaching, I've been run my own companies, obviously, which had sales teams, as well as being a head of sales for multiple companies. You know, many sales professionals who struggle, you know, and these are Bob's words, they live in their clients' resistance. They live in their prospects' resistance. They're operating from a place of resistance from the jump, and we need to overcome that mindset in order to improve our closing ratio, make deeper connections with our clients, and ultimately become that 20% of the sales team that sells 80% of the products for our company. Wonderful conversation. Absolutely, you're going to love this one. But before we get to Bob, I have a big announcement, a huge announcement for you guys. Master of the Close, my one-call close system course, the number one inbound closing system that has ever been created. We close north of 80% of all the qualified leads that came into our business. And I have built this process over the course of my 20-year career, implemented it in fitness, in tech, in insurance, and consulted clients from a ton of other industries. If inbound leads are part of how you grow your business, you want to go to Master of the Close. That's masteroftheclose.com today. Get in the course and learn this system. It is a 5-step process. I detail out every line of the script, battle-tested script. Every word of this script has been tested over thousands and thousands of inbound leads, leading to a north of 80% close ratio. We had new reps coming into our office that were selling day one 25 to 30% of the qualified leads. And within 3 months, all of them, every single one, was north of 80%, closing 8 out of every 10 qualified inbound leads. If inbound leads are part of your sales strategy, if they're part of your growth strategy, do not miss masteroftheclose.com. You can go there today, get in the course, learn this material, apply it to your work, teach it to your team. I promise you will sell more business. All right, let's get on to my guest today, the author of The Joy of Closing, Bob King. All right, Bob, it's tremendous to have you on the show here, man. You wrote this incredible book, and I'm looking forward to digging into your philosophy. I want to start with, why are so people bad at selling? Like naturally, like most people naturally. Like there's those few, you know, but most people, most of us, myself included, I put myself 100% in this bucket, just out of the rip, terrible. And we have to learn all these lessons. What do you think it is about our nature that kind of we have to learn this skill?
I think there's a couple of reasons. Number one, being a closer, and you say selling, I'm going to just flip over the cards and say what you're really talking about is what you're really asking about is closing, that how to earn a customer's trust and give them the confidence to move forward with a decision that hopefully is going to change their life for the better, requires commitment. You have to be committed to the idea that moving forward today is the absolute best thing for your customer, for your company, and for you, hopefully in that order. And, if you're not committed, it's very hard for them to become committed. And commitment, nobody runs toward commitment, so it's kind of an unnatural state. I think the other reason is because to get to a yes, you sometimes have to endure a lot of no's. And so, a lot of people don't have the stamina, or they take something personally that isn't personal, and just don't keep their eyes on the prize of actually earning someone's trust and getting them to commit to something that's going to make their life better, and also put money in your pocket and keep your company in business and allow, the change that you're advocating for your customer and really the world to be implemented. To be a change agent is to stand in the crosshairs of people's resistance. And that's an unnatural state, but it's one that's incredibly rewarding. So I love that question. No one's ever asked me that before.
I love that your take is around this idea of commitment in my own sales career. And we talked a little bit about this before we went live. Like, I grew up in the insurance industry, and the first 3 years of my career were horrible. In fact, my father-in-law at the time actually fired me. I talked him out of it, but I was, for a moment, before I got down on my knees in front of him in his office, begging him not to fire me, I was fired by my father-in-law for how bad I was. And this is kind of where the question is going. It wasn't until I understood the value of the product that I was providing, I felt this almost physical, like I couldn't even bring my hand to the phone to make a cold call. So how do we develop, if I'm sitting here and I'm chosen sales as a profession, and this idea of commitment is like, maybe I'm not committed to this. How do we start to become committed to the product, service, et cetera, that we're trying to sell or close?
Well, it's not even a question of, it's really what your focus is, because there's, so many facts, there's lots of facts that are in the world, right? Like, there's other options. Well, let me just start by saying, my book, The Joy of Closing, works great if you can believe in your product, and especially if you want to sell on value instead of price. If your product or your services are different and better than the competition and maybe a little more expensive, this is a great book for you. That's what I'm good at. If you are, the cheapest option, but not quite as good, it might work, because understanding how to value that and how to make your customer value that, is good. If you're just ripping people off, then it's really hard to manufacture the kind of enthusiasm that you have to have. And part of the reason I wrote the book is because the companies that are best at training closers often are the worst companies for customers to be in business with, selling overpriced products and things like that. And I really think that's at a loss, because when you were selling insurance for your father-in-law, it's very likely you had a great product that was good for your customers. And until you had that sort of come to your father-in-law moment, but it's also kind of a come to Jesus moment with, is this really something I want to do? And how can I be successful? You probably were not in touch with all the great reasons for the customer to move forward. And instead, you're just living in their resistance, which is, this is a really big decision. How can I go forward? How do I have the confidence to know there isn't something better out there? Or that this product isn't there's so many ways to second guess yourself, and for them to, the difference between a closer and a salesperson is a closer gives that customer an emotional experience of understanding the product, understanding the company, and understanding, how that scope of work fits into the price that you want to charge them. And at the end of it, when you say, are we doing this? You want that customer to feel, at least, of course, who wouldn't? Or how soon can we get started? And you have a product you believe in, and, all the other things that need to be right. But with a lot of times with salespeople, they have all that stuff that's right, but they don't have that commitment to moving forward, or they don't have the commitment to, they don't know how to make their agenda the customer's idea. Because it takes, you have to do certain things. You have to shake up the status quo and make them very uncomfortable with what they're doing now if you want to produce a change. Well, if you're not committed to what you are looking to accomplish and really that idea, you're not going to make that person uncomfortable. You're not going to have the courage or even maybe just the skills to know how to do that. But that's what it takes because the change, you're producing change. Salespeople are agents of change. And to be an effective agent of change, You have to shake up the status quo. You have to make them fall in love with the idea of working with your company. You have to give them a sensual experience of their product. If you're selling insurance, you're really selling security. You're selling peace of mind. There's a little bit of like tax avoidance and all that stuff, and you need to educate them about all that stuff. I'm obviously I know a little bit about this because when I after I started consulting, the first sort of non home improvement / solar / whatever. Well, the first one was a skincare place, but the second one was an insurance agent, and we ended up working for him and his mom and his mom's best friend. It was like, I guess insurance sales runs in families.
Yes.
But all of them got revamped and changed their approach from one of like, okay, well, here's all the stuff you need to think about to, here's everything that you need. Here's all the information you need to make this decision. And, just the first payment's just a check for $114 to get your whatever started. And I can tell you, their customers were a lot happier being able to make a decision and having the confidence to move forward than they were when they just left them in the misery of their indecision. And so that's probably what happened. You went from someone who was more comfortable leaving that customer in the misery of their indecision to someone who had the confidence to recommend a plan, show them, all the great reasons for doing it, make them feel uncomfortable with not moving forward, and then sit there and wait after you ask for a price for their resistance to express itself, usually with a lie, which is a nice name, it's a bad name for an objection, but most objections are lies. And then, work with their resistance, have the intimacy with that customer that allows them to have the confidence to move forward with you and your company. That's really why I wrote the book.
Yeah, I love this concept of...
And I bet that's what came up in your conversation with your father-in-law. What do you remember from that conversation that made your life different?
What I remember from that conversation, first and foremost, was the pure terror of going home to my wife's... We're now divorced, but going home to my wife and having to explain to her that her dad just fired me because I couldn't sell.
So I don't mean to laugh, but that is hilarious.
Yeah, right. And literally what I said to him was, and probably the best sales line I've ever had in my entire life, right? I'm literally, when I say down, I got down on one knee next to his desk. And I said, his name was Jim. I said, Jim, please do not make me go home and tell your little girl that you fired me. You don't want that call. And I don't want that call. So what can we do here? Right? Like, that's what I said to him.
Amazing.
Right? Probably the best sale I've ever had because he literally said, this isn't working. You can have some time to roll off and find something else, but, we can't keep you here. And I think what that drove me to do is two things. One, I didn't have another choice. So this idea of living in their resistance, I love this concept, living in their resistance. Like that's what I was doing, right? I was imagining all the...
You closed him on not firing you.
Yes.
I mean, that's really what you did.
Yeah. So now I had this high incentive to keep going. And the other thing it did, it forced me to dig into the product. So I started reading at night policy forms, which is like reading the terms and conditions of whatever product you sell out there, guys. Like this is the terms, like 250 pages of, hey, we give you this, then we take it away when this happens, and then we'll give it back to you here, but then we'll take it away again if this happens. Like, I dug in, and when I started to get, this is again why I like this idea that you're talking about of being committed to your product. It wasn't until I felt like I knew exactly what this did for the people that I was selling for them, that then I could have a conversation with them, to your point, which actually pulled out some of the emotional stuff. And, my question for you, I guess, is, I've dealt both my own selling career, I've run sales teams, I've also done a ton of consulting on sales. And what I find is most people present themselves as value sellers, yet actually in practice sell on price.
Totally agree. Except for the 20% on every sales team that kick ass.
Yes. Yeah. So like once you get below that, whoever usually is the top salesperson or sales 2 or 3, everyone below that is going, of course I sell on value, yet they actually sell on price. So,
agreed.
And to me, oftentimes there's a lack of awareness in what they're actually even doing, right? Like
it's not awareness, it's focus. They are not focused on, they know, They know, and by the way, a lot of time, listen, not every product is the best choice for customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to learn how to sell that stuff too, because are you focused? Like everything's a mixed bag a little bit. Like there's good reasons for going forward, and there's reasons to be cautious. And if your job is to create that change, you cannot be focused on the reasons for being cautious. You have to be focused and make important the reasons for going forward. Closers know how to do that, and salespeople don't. Generally.
There's another idea that I'd love to get your take on here. It's a line I use a lot when I'm talking to people. And I coach my kids' sports and stuff. I'm very involved there. And I use the same concept with them, which is detaching from the outcome. The other, and I use an example of, I ended up playing baseball in college, but up until my junior year of high school, I was not a college-worthy baseball player. I was a good baseball player. I'd make an all-star team or whatever. Like I was definitely good, but I was never at the top ever. And then,
just an all-star.
Yeah. Well, kind of Little League, you make a team or whatever.
I played Little League. The ball came to me one time, and I was asleep. I was literally asleep. The coach had to come wake me up. It was my father's proudest moment, I'm sure.
That does not surprise me. Most of Little League is horrendous.
It was not for me.
I know we're way off topic here, but my kid plays basketball during the winter. And what's funny, at his age, at 11, whatever sport he's playing is the sport he wants to play in high school, right? So it's like, we get the baseball season, it's baseball, whatever, okay. But he came to me the other day and he goes, Dad, I really think I want to play basketball in high school. And I said, well, why is that, bud? And he goes, it's really hard to stay focused playing baseball. And I was like, bro, early on, it's terrible. I get it. Like, no one can throw a strike. No one can actually hit the ball. Half the time, you're just twiddling your thumbs. Like, I get it. But coming back to this, right, this idea of detaching from the outcome, it wasn't until my junior year, I had my high school baseball coach, like him and I were like oil and water. I was one from like a town way out in the middle of nowhere that just got sucked into this big district. So there was like a little bit of like other side of the track stuff. I had we'll call it a unique style of playing baseball. And he hated me. And I was always kind of like, I had to fight and scrap for every minute of playing time. And then one day I was like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care what happens. I'm just going to go up to bat. I'm going to hit the pitches I can hit. I'm going to run. I literally don't care because it doesn't, in my head, I wasn't thinking about it in a positive way at the time. In my head, it doesn't matter what I do. I can hit a home run or a double. I'm not going to get more playing time from this guy. So I just don't.
You detach from the outcome for whatever crazy reason.
When I did that, it changed the course of my baseball career. And then the same exact thing happened in my sales career. I had so much fear of getting fired that I was like, I'm just going to call everybody. I'm going to talk to everybody. I'm going to sell everybody. And I don't give a shit what happens because caring almost got me fired.
That's so funny. Well, it may interest you to know there is a chapter in my book called, what is it called? Let me get it right. It's in part 3. It's called, Slump Streaks and the Cure for Commission Breath, right there.
I love it.
And what that is, and what it says, I'll give you the cure, is when you get in a slump, it's almost always for the same reason. When you get on a streak, it's because you sold a bunch of deals and you don't really care. You care, like you want to make money, but you're like, knock yourself out, buddy, whatever you want to do. You have a little bit more of a carefree attitude, and people find that very attractive. And when you get in a slump, it suddenly this thing happens where you're making a sales call about you, which is, if you want to watch a souffle fall faster than anything else, just make a sales call about you. Talk about yourself instead of when you find common interests, talk about it from your perspective instead of from their perspective, and watch how quickly they become uninterested in you. But there's many other examples of that. But when you are. And reason, it's part of what I hate about closing culture right now, stare at the Ferrari you want to buy on the back flap of your, car seat, whatever, the wind, the thing that blocks the sun out, and use that to motivate your self-will. That is horrible advice, because if you're making that sales call about you, which is what happens when you get in a slump, suddenly it's like, I got to get this deal instead of how can I serve my customer? It just gets worse and worse and worse. And so the cure is to not focus on your closing rate, but to focus on your decision rate. How many of the customers did I meet with make a decision as the result of the information I gave them and a full understanding of what my product or service or my company can do or not do for them? And if that customer, if your customers, if you have a high decision rate, your closing rate will be the highest in the company. Because every indecision is a no. Every indecision reflects as a no on your closing rate. And not everyone's going to say no. Like if you're in sales, 10% of the people are going to say yes anyway. Like there's almost no salesperson that doesn't have a 10% closing rate, which is probably what you had with your father-in-law. And your father-in-law's like, you thought, oh, I'm selling 10%, I'm making some money. And he's like, this guy's killing me. He's taking all these qualified leads and he's losing the 15% between 10 and 25 that I'm expecting of anybody else. But that extra, to get from that 10 to 25 or even 30 or 40, you've got to be committed. You've got to believe in what you're doing. You've got to have some techniques. You've got to be able to take that customer on an emotional journey instead of an analytical journey, which a lot of insurance agents are really so focused on an analytic brain that they never let the customer aspire to have security and peace of mind.
Yeah, I want to dig into this because we talked about it a little beforehand when I was explaining some of my background, which is, I adore the insurance industry, and I've said this to people forever. It's the industry that really, where I have cut my teeth. It's provided me with a lifestyle I could have never dreamed of, and I have such a deep value for what we do. And
also, if you're in sales, like you probably already know this, but one thing I figured out when I went from selling tea to solar power is the more zeros after, before the period of the product you're selling, the better your job is as a salesperson. Like the more zeros, the better. And there's a lot of zeros before insurance, period.
Oh, 100%.
And so that's probably the biggest reason why it's a great job. But it also is great for customers, and you really are providing a lot of peace of mind, a lot of financial, there's lots of reasons why insurance helps people financially, having to do with taxes and regulation and things like that. I mean, there's a lot that insurance people can do for customers if they know how to communicate that.
Yes.
But again, if you're communicating it analytically, you're not giving most of your customers a good reason to go forward with you.
And
oddly.
Yeah. And this is the question I wanted to ask you here, because insurance is not unique in this, but it does have this attribute. It is mostly operated by people who are put in sales. It's a sales business, but they come to the industry with more of a service perspective or mentality. So for those people who are,
that's good. That's not bad.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. I think it's probably easier to go from service to sales mentality than it is to go from sales to service mentality. But for those individuals, say in insurance who listen, or for in many of the other industries that have a similar dynamic, if I really want to sell more, and maybe I know about myself that I tend to be more of a service oriented person, but I know I need to sell more. How do I start to crack, what do I need to do in my mindset or in how I approach my business in the sales side of my operation to get myself out of that service mentality into a more sales closing mentality?
Well, so first let's acknowledge that the reason you're successful, if you're that kind of person in the insurance industry, is that your demeanor conveys trust, because you're not panicked about getting a sale. You know you have a product that's good for your customer. And even if you're not the best person at communicating why and how and creating urgency and all the other things that get their limbic brain engaged, at least you feel right to them. And the trick is to add a little razzle dazzle and a little bit of urgency and other reasons that the customer connect with, a little bit of emotional appeal, a lot more making them feel uncomfortable with what they're doing now without losing what you're bringing that's great. So let me preface it by saying like those people are successful for a reason, and you don't want to take away the reason that they're successful by making them super salesy. That's not the point. The point is to keep all that. But a lot of times they don't really have a sales pitch. A lot of insurance people just don't know what's going to happen between warm up and price presentation, right? And they kind of make that part up as they go along. That's a little like driving your car and not knowing which pedal makes it go forward and which make it, if you have to think about how to make the car go forward and how to make it stop or where your wipers are or all that stuff, you are a terrible driver, right? And everyone is when they start off, right? Because, you can't look at traffic. You can't look at, so you won't know when the customer's nodding their head and agreeing with everything you say or shaking their head or looking at their Apple Watch and taking emails while you're telling them about how to keep their family secure. So you just need to know what's going to happen between you warming up, finding common ground, figuring out, doing a little discovery and making them like you. to you telling them a price and then working with their resistance to close them. And that pitch should be an emotional journey that you take every customer on, that leads them from chaos to from chaos to clarity. And the clarity is, this person understands me. They have the exact right product for me. Their company's been around for 100 years and there's no one better to work with. And the price they're charging is, but a shadow of the benefits I'm going to receive. Like, that's what you want every customer to feel. And it's not going to work with every customer, but it should work with like the vast majority. And then after all that, there's ways I can, help people turn into closers, because, the first no is just, an opportunity. But there's lots of stuff about that. And there's a lot of books about that too. I mean, I also don't the truth is, I don't know. I've never gotten through a book on closing or even sales other than Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a great book that everybody should read as a human being, in my opinion. But the rest of them kind of make my skin crawl, which is why I wrote a book.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have not written a book on sales, but my favorite sales book of all time is actually not a sales book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I mean, that's...
I've seen some of his videos and they're pretty great, I will say. Yeah.
So when you're talking about developing an emotional appeal, is that storytelling?
It is storytelling. An emotional journey is telling a story. And the story is, here's your life without the product. Here's your life with the product. By the way, we're this, that, and the other thing that you have common ground and that you tribal allegiances. And now is the best time to do it. Are we doing it?
Yeah. How do you develop those stories? And I've had a lot of people ask me this question. They'll say, there's a guy in my office. He's been doing it for 30 years.
Well, unfortunately, I distilled. So here's the thing about one call closing. Like, I was trained by scoundrels to, sell a product for more money than people should have paid. And I didn't know it. And then when I figured it out, I left, went to another company that was a little better. And then a guy from that company started his own company. And I became their VP of sales and trained other people to do it. And when you train other people, you master it. The yogis say, if you want to learn something, practice it. If you want to master it, teach it. And I really mastered the art of one call closing by training others how to do it. And then went to a very reputable company where I couldn't employ those old tricks, and reflected on why I'd been successful at a certain company and realized that it was all belief. When I believed in what I was doing, magic happened. But having the ability to do a presentation that takes the customer on that emotional journey and having the skills to work with their resistance put me at the top of a very competitive sales team. And I knew it and I loved it. And it was really fun. And the other thing that happened was, even when I was working for Scoundrels, before that, I'd been in the film business and I was hired 5 times in 19 years. And so when I started learning how I was blowing deals by arguing with customers or making stuff about me or 100 other things, I realized that learning the skill actually made my whole life better. And so for all those reasons, I really embraced what it was. And then I realized like you can't, if you're working for a modern company and a modern sales presentation, you can't take an hour and a half to get to price, right? Which is sort of the old school one call closing, throw dirt on the floor and, don't clean it up with the things like all that. So all the techniques I was trained in have been used since the 40s or maybe before. Probably, there's something with cavemen that they did to one call close people. But so I needed to distill it, even just to work for the company I was working for, into a streamlined process. And as I started coaching other people in other industries, I distilled it down to a thing called one call magic, which is 7 steps and a forecast. So really 8, but a forecast is a sentence, so I didn't call it a step. And really, if you want your sales pitch to be, emotional and persuasive, you really just have to do the things that I'm telling you that are in my book, the Joy of Closing. And you will, the first part's sort of how I came in. It's sort of a work memoir about how I came into the information I came into, which is kind of a crazy story. And then there's a big, how-to on how to not necessarily earn that customer's business the first day, because a lot of times B2B customers, like, you're not even meeting with someone who can say yes, but you're always meeting with someone who can say no. And you only ever have the element of surprise with a customer one time, and that's at that first meeting. So if you can, make the absolute strongest first impression, there's no sales job where that isn't powerful or profitable. And then the last part's on how to create happy customers and get their referrals and 5-star reviews, which is also a skill that requires closing, because nobody just sits down and writes you a good review. You have to close the customer on that as well. And so that's what the book's about, is really how to do that. And I really, so far, I have not found an industry that hasn't been effective for, to some degree. Actually, to a really crazy degree. So yeah, I wanted to be the conduit from, old school one-call closing technique into modern ways of selling, where you're not trying to get the customer's shackles to warm up or wear them down. You're actually just using your skills and having a pitch. My favorite is coaching teams where they say, "Oh, I don't have a pitch." It's like, no, you have a pitch. It's just terrible. Or a lot of people who say that this is their pitch. A lot of people say they don't have a pitch. Basically, the new way, what I've found a few times, is they just ask a bunch of discovery questions and then tailor everything that comes after that to whatever they think is the customer's point of vulnerability, which is a pitch, but it's not a great pitch.
Why does that style break down? Because I do think you're right. I think that's a very common way of going about it.
Because you're not taking the customer on an emotional journey. You're sort of picking at a pain point, and that produces some emotion, and some customers will go forward because they're just, in so much pain, but you're not building trust.
The trust comes from the stories and that kind of stuff.
The trust comes from I did not take a job working for scoundrels to become a trustworthy person, but it turns out that becoming trustworthy is the best way to earn someone's trust. And that has made my whole life better. And so that's the other thing about going from a salesperson to a closer is my experience is inevitably it will make the rest of your life better. And I'm absolutely certain that your whole life was better after that conversation with your father-in-law, when you had to go from someone who was just presenting to someone who could earn someone's business. There's no way to get to that point without it improving the rest of your life. But please correct me if I'm wrong, or what's your thought on that?
No, I think you're 100% right. I mean, one of the things that it drove me towards was open-ended questions. I had no idea the difference between a closed question and an open question. And I think a lot of times, an even more systemic issue beyond just discovery questions is those discovery questions are not open-ended. It's just like, how much revenue do you do? What has been your 3-year if it's a sales tool, it's, what has been your 3-year revenue trajectory? And, these very tactical, closed-ended, and that person's just regurgitating facts back to them.
Well, and the other thing that people don't do when they ask those kind of discovery questions, the essential thing that these people who, I guess I'll now call it the discovery close, where they just discover some stuff and then beat the customer's head with it. The other thing they don't do, which is vital, when you ask a discovery question, and they can be open-ended or not open-ended, but especially if they're open-ended, but it's usually let's look at your bill, or let's look at your skin, or let's look at your finance, how much money do you make, and if your insurance, things like that. When a customer divulges anything to you, or when a human being divulges anything to you, it is essential to respond. And you can respond in one of two ways. If you're in a sales situation, the best way to respond is to use your expertise to benefit them. Give them information they did not have when they disclose that information to you. So if they're telling you their revenue, you have to tell them something about that influences, you're basically, when your customer is expecting two things from you on a sales call presentation. A scope of work and a price, right? And so usually if they give you some discovery information, it's essential that you immediately respond by telling them how that affects your recommended scope of work. In other words, you're helping them with the decision they're about to make, and you're lending your expertise to them. And that will build trust. It will also empower them to make an informed decision when the time comes. And you're just a decent human being. You're not just sucking in information from them and then using it against them. You are building a rapport by them disclosing information and you making their life better. And that's the first thing. And the other thing you can do if you're in a personal situation is respond by disclosing something of a similar nature about your own life. So if someone tells you about some traumatic incident from their life, it's important to give them a little blood as well, so that they don't just feel naked and stared at.
I've gotten pushback from sales professionals on the adding value in the discovery portion, and they'll say, well, I don't want to give them the solution to their problem before they've done business with me, right? How do you overcome that objection from sales professionals where they feel like their solution or their information, like they're like a gatekeeper to it?
I guess people think that, really great closers like everybody likes, and that is not the truth. The truth is a really great closer, a huge percent, 80% of people, once they get to know you, would not do business with anybody else. But there's also 20% that will just hate you because you're paying too much attention to them or whatever reason. And when I was, going into homes like 2 and 3 times a day, if I didn't get kicked out of a house at least like every couple of months, I would think I must be holding back. I'm not letting myself get out there for people to fall in love with, and so I would, jazz it up a little bit and pay whatever I do so that I do. But so I think with that type of person where they're just sucking information, there are customers that are just okay doing that. But the vast majority of people, when you take in a bunch of information and don't reciprocate in one way or another, they will hate you and they will not want to do business with you. And they also don't know why.
Why is that?
Well, people just aren't that self-aware. They just have a visceral reaction to you. Oh, this guy just asked me 16 questions and I just told him all these things about my business and he's just like taking notes. He's not giving me any. It's also, you're missing a great opportunity. You can establish your expertise and give your customer, you're not giving them information about your scope of work or your price necessarily. You're giving them information about how you use their information in order to best serve their needs. And if you don't have enough expertise to lend them, some information about that without telling them without ruining the ending, then you need to work on your skills and figure out how to do that. Because storytelling is revealing certain facts that the facts put together take that customer on an emotional journey that reveals the truth. Yeah. You can't, it's not like, oh, I'm going to reveal no truth to you until 5 minutes before the end. I mean, you think about, my background's in filmmaking, when you tell a story about a character, 99% of feature films are an emotional journey about one character. And the most important time in their life so far. Well, 99% of sales calls are about the emotional journey of your customer making a decision that's the most important decision that they're going to make so far about whatever it is that you're talking about. Maybe it's not, maybe they have things going on in their life that's more important, but in terms of their business or whatever it is you're influencing them about, you need to take it really seriously and empower them with all the information they need to make a decision, not piece out little stuffs and not only a lot of salespeople think like, oh, you just have to tell them the parts that make them want to do it. If there's some reason that working with you or your company or making this decision is difficult or, going to impact them in a negative way, I love talking about that stuff because it builds trust. I don't focus on it. But I want them to have the feeling that if there's any reason they're not going to do it, I'm going to tell them that as well. And that's, I think, a huge, advantage when you have the guts to do that. It really makes people trust you even if they don't like you. And I don't really care if they like me. I care if they trust me.
Yeah, I'm sure you found this in your career at different times as well. But one of the most high value referral partners I ever had early in my insurance sales career was someone that I told that we shouldn't do business together with.
Oh, yeah.
Worked through their whole process, saw what they had. And when I got to the end, I said, I'm going to give you to this agency down the street because they do this thing as well as anybody. And I don't do it. Like, I just, you know what I mean? I would be doing you a disservice. And there were some other reasons, but it was just a better fit. Referred them over, had a great experience. They sent people to me, not the agency they ended up doing business with. And a lot of that came out of what you're talking about, these follow-up questions. The other thing that drives me nuts that salespeople do is they have their 7 things they have to ask or whatever, right? To understand the thing. And they'll ask those 7 things, but they'll never ask a follow-up question. So like, even if you don't have a story to that question that you can apply, you can ask a simple follow-up question just to like validate that you've heard them. and that you're not just some
Or
robot.
just to be and the other thing that I think people really I think really separates salesers from close people. Closers tend to be curious people, that are really look, sales is a hard job in a lot of ways. And if you're not interested in people and how they make decisions, it's going to be a hard job, but it's so easy to become interested in that stuff. And once you do it, it's hard not to do it because people are awesome and wonderful. And even if I don't sell to them, if I met an interesting human being and saw how they lived and got to see an up close, person, just an idea of who that person is and how they live their life. If that's not interesting to you, maybe sales isn't the best career for you. And so if you have that mindset, you're naturally going to ask follow-up questions that maybe have nothing to do with the scope of work. And, maybe me asking that question is why 20% of the people are going to kick me out of their house, but it's also why 80% of the people are going to fall in love with the idea of working together.
Yeah. Curiosity is a good life skill for improving just about your entire life.
I heard a guy interviewed on Fresh Air once, and he was like in his hundreds, and Terry Gross asked him what his secret is. And he said, I think it's just, I'm still really curious about how all this is going to turn out. and I've adopted that attitude. I probably heard that in my 30s or something. And I still have that attitude.
Yeah. So I want to pivot just slightly to, we live in social media, internet world now. When it comes to, I get a lot of questions from sales professionals around building their own personal brand on social.
God. You're asking the wrong. I have struggled with that so mightily, but I have figured out a way that I want to launch my online presence. So I hired someone to help me do something in that regard. So I'm, stay tuned. Joyofclosing.com is my website. I'm putting a quiz on there. Are you a closer quiz? So that will be launched in the next week or two. And I'm going to learn how to do this like every other schmo who wrote a book. But I am so not the expert. If you want to see me hiking through Scotland, you can look on my Instagram account. I've done nothing. I'm a failure so far at that, but I'm not done. I'm ready to take it on.
Well, I think what the good news is from that comment is that you don't have to have built some dynamic because this.
No, you do. I listen. Your podcast is great, and I'm really loving our conversation. I've been on dozens of podcasts now, and I've sold dozens of books as a result. The good thing is, it's great for my consulting career. That's great. It's paid for itself. It's awesome, and I love that. But I want to sell some. I think I wrote a book that's a force for good in the world. I think when someone takes a job as a salesperson, they should get this book so that they are not really trained as a salesperson. They're really trained as a closer. They connect with all the great reasons for, and not just, for your company and your success and, supporting your family, but just how your own personal growth is affected because everybody is a closer. Everybody has that skill. Whether it's if you picked the book your book club reads or the movie you go see on a Saturday night or gotten your kids to clean their room or go to college, you have successfully made your agenda another person's idea. And the only thing more satisfying than finding what we want and knowing it is helping someone else do that. And so this is a skill that makes your whole life better. And learning how to sell and present also can do that, but not in the way that learning how to work with people's resistance and close them does. And so I wrote this book because it's a force for good. And I want people to be able to, I think when you should get my book and Dale Carnegie and go out and turn into a closer and don't waste time being a salesperson. That's my opinion. And so I want to sell some books. So I'm going to create a social media presence. And hopefully I found a clever way to do that by putting a quiz on my website. And I thought of something I want to do in my videos that you'll see when I do it. When I start doing it, you'll know it because it's going to be cool.
Well, Bob, this has been a tremendous conversation. You've mentioned the website a couple times, but just share one more time where, and guys, every link that Bob talks about, I will make sure I have in the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube or wherever you listen, just scroll down or just go direct, obviously. But where can they get the book? Where can they get into your world? So as you come out with more stuff, they know about it.
My book is on Amazon and it's just Joy of Closing, Bob King. There's an audiobook that I recorded as well as Kindle and paperback. That's the best way to get the book, even internationally. It's pretty much everywhere. And then my website is joyofclosing.com. I'm going to put a quiz on there, the Are You a Closer quiz. So if you want to know if you're a closer or a salesperson or even a potential closer, you'll be able to assess that in the days and weeks to come. And then, and based on where you come out in the quiz, I will send you a chapter of the book so that, you can focus on whatever that lands. If you have a sales job now, there's no chance that reading my book will not bring tons of success you wouldn't otherwise have, just because I'm not you and I don't think of the world the way you think of the world, and having a new perspective on how to get a customer to move forward will be beneficial to you. And closers already know that. Salespeople think they're doing it right already. But trust me, if you're not in the 20% of people that do 80% of your company's sales, there's something in here that will push you closer to that, if not get you over that hurdle. And I'd like to say that it'll get you over that hurdle. In fact, I'll say it. It'll get you over that hurdle. So that's my book. My website's joyofclosing.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Instagram. I have a TikTok account, Joyful Closer, that I posted no videos on because, like I said, I'm going to learn how to do this too. When I started coaching people, one of the real things that came as a shock is that it's not enough to have the best idea. Now, you'd think that, because I was coaching individuals at first, and individuals, they're coming to me. So, of course, they're going to listen to what I have to say. Yeah. But when I started coaching teams, I realized that I needed to close the team on what I was coaching them on. And so I had to do all the things that I tell people do. I had to shake up their status quo. I had to show them make them feel the pleasure of my solution. I had to take them on an emotional journey just to adopt the best idea that I had crafted for them. So that was a fun thing. And now I feel like I have the same opportunity in terms of being influential in the world of sales. So I'm getting ready to close the world on the idea that this book will help them. And that's going to all launch from my website and social media. I'll go on Threads and I'll go on Blue Sky and X and everywhere else to get people to come to a greater understanding of what their pitch is and how it can be improved, and how to close instead of just being a salesperson, or what I call a great presenter. There's a lot of great presenters out there now, which may be the most harmful to customers. And because they make their customer want what they have, but they don't work with their resistance to get it for them. And now they're at the mercy of anyone with a lower price or better skills. So,
well, Bob, I'm glad you wrote the book. I'm glad you joined our show. I love your methodology. I encourage everyone to visit your website, get the book, and I wish you nothing but the best, my friend.
Great speaking with you, Ryan.